Help. I just ran away. My parents, my two little sisters are chained up. I can't go back. That was the 911 call that shook the small town of Paris, California. It came from a 17. Her voice was shaking. Her words were broken. At what hour did you say? Chained? What police discovered that night in 2018 wasn't just abuse. It wasn't just neglect. It was something out of a horror film. But it was all real. And the worst part? It had been happening for years. They were known as the Turpin family. David and Louise. 13 kids. One house. And not a single soul in the neighborhood had any idea that behind that front door was a prison. From the outside, the Turpins were quiet, private, deeply religious. The type of family that didn't mingle much, but smiled politely when seen. David, the father, was an engineer. Louise, the mother, stayed home to homeschool the children. They wore matching outfits in public. The boys had identical haircuts. Family photos showed them smiling at Disneyland, riding horses, celebrating birthdays. But those photos were carefully staged, designed to hide something unimaginable. Inside the house, the windows were blacked out. The air was thick with rot. The bedrooms had padlocks on the outside. And in one room, two girls were found in chains, their skin bruised, their wrists infected. They hadn't been outside in months. Some hadn't showered in a year. And one child, age 12, couldn't remember what sunlight felt like. But the question everyone would ask later is, how did no one notice? This is the story of the Turpin family. A story of control, manipulation, religious extremism, and one of the most disturbing cases of child abuse in modern American history. But it's also the story of one girl, Jordan, who, after 17 years of silence, found the courage to escape. She didn't know what a police officer looked like. She didn't know what the word medication meant. She'd never spoken on a phone before. But she ran anyway, with nothing but a broken phone, a shaky plan, and the hope that someone out there would believe her. And when that door opened, the world saw what evil looks like when it wears a friendly smile. The girl was shaking as she clutched a deactivated cell phone in both hands. She had found it buried in the couch cushions back home. A useless piece of plastic to most, but to her, it was freedom. Jordan Turpin had never seen the world outside, never crossed a real street, never spoken to anyone who wasn't her family. She didn't know what 911 would do, but she had one mission burned into her mind since midnight: get help or die trying. It was just before 6 a.m. on January 14th, 2018. The streets of Paris, California, were quiet, too quiet. Jordan had been wandering for nearly 20 minutes when she finally dialed. Dispatcher, 911, what's your emergency? Jordan, I just ran away from home. And I live in a family of 13. And my two little sisters are chained right now. To their bed. There was silence on the line. Dispatcher, you said they're chained? Jordan, yes, they wake up at night, and they start crying. And they tell me they want me to call somebody. And I'm the only one who can. Her voice trembled. She didn't know her address. She didn't know the word medication. When asked if her parents take pills or drugs, she hesitated and answered, "What's medication?" Police were dispatched within minutes. And as the cruiser pulled alongside the sidewalk where Jordan stood, an officer slowly exited. Body cam footage would later show a thin, pale girl, 17 years old, but looking no older than 11. Messy brown hair, sunken cheeks, and eyes that kept darting around as if expecting someone to grab her from behind. She held out the phone like it was a weapon. "I have pictures," she said. "They're in chains." Officer Anthony Kalash gently asked where she came from. Jordan pointed, hands still trembling. "That house, that one right there. Please don't let them know I'm out." What she showed him on that phone would later shake the country. Photos of her sisters with bruises around their wrists, their legs shackled to bedposts with metal chains. Officer Kalashi called for backup. Now it was official. They weren't walking into a welfare check. They were walking into something much darker. Jordan stayed near the curb, watching. She didn't know if she was about to be rescued or punished. For her entire life, the outside world had been described to her as evil, full of monsters, a place where no one would believe her. But in that moment, when those officers looked at her without fear or judgment, she realized something no one in her family had ever told her. You did the right thing. As the police approached the house at 160 Muir Woods Road, one officer noted, the door's locked, curtains sealed. It's dead silent inside. But then, a slow creak, the front door opened, and what they found inside made even the most seasoned officers stop in their tracks. The door creaked open, slow and deliberate, not because someone invited the officers in, but because the air inside resisted them. The stench was overwhelming, a mix of urine, mold, rotting food, and something more primal: neglect. It wasn't just dirty, it was unnatural. The kind of filth that doesn't build up in weeks or months, but years. Flashlights scanned the hallway. Clothes, stained and shredded, were piled in corners. Walls smeared with grime. The carpet crunched underfoot, brittle with dried waste. The officers stepped deeper inside. Then they heard it. A soft clinking sound. Not loud, not panicked. Just steady, metal against metal. They turned a corner. And there, in one of the bedrooms, were two girls, no older than 13, chained to their beds. Their wrists were wrapped in metal cuffs, bolted to the bed frames with padlocks and industrial chains. Their arms were scarred, swollen, and discolored from infection. The room had no toys, no books, no light, just a bucket in the corner, overflowing. One officer froze. "This isn't punishment," he whispered. "This is imprisonment." The other rooms were no better. In another bedroom, a child lay in filth, barely breathing. He was 12, but looked 6. His skin hung from his bones. He couldn't speak. His eyes didn't even follow the officers. The kitchen held molded bread, half-eaten burritos, dozens of canned goods, all padlocked in cabinets. The refrigerator? Empty. The parents? David and Louise Turpin, sitting in the living room, calmly. Louise smiled awkwardly. "They're just a little malnourished," she said. "We homeschool. We're strict, but loving." David nodded, but said almost nothing. He just stared, blank and cold, like a man watching from behind glass. But nothing could prepare the officers for the final room. A teenage boy was shackled to his bed, arms so thin they looked like they'd snap under their own weight. Next to him, a journal. And in the days to come, the world would hear what happened in that house, and why no one did anything. The news broke like a thunderclap. 13 siblings found captive in Paris, California. Children, some chained to beds, severely malnourished. Parents arrested for torture and abuse. And across the country, from living rooms to newsrooms, people asked the same question. How did no one see this coming? How does something this evil stay hidden for so long? The answer wasn't simple. Because the Turpins weren't monsters in a haunted house. They were masters of appearances. From the outside, 160 Muir Woods Road looked like any other suburban home. Tan walls, clean roof, no broken windows, no screaming, just silence. The yard was lifeless. No kids playing, no toys in the grass, but that didn't raise alarms. Because in a quiet neighborhood, quiet is normal. And David and Louise knew that. They blended in. In public, the Turpin children wore matching clothes, modest, old-fashioned, and oddly formal. They moved in a line. They rarely spoke. If they did, it was in rehearsed phrases, stiff and robotic. People thought they were homeschooled, religious, maybe just old-fashioned. Weird, but harmless. In Disneyland photos, they looked like a church choir. Smiles, but not joy. Posture, but not freedom. And no one questioned it. The children were homeschooled, on paper. David filed with the state as the principal of their private school. He gave it a name, Sandcastle Day School. It had no students, no teachers, no curriculum. But legally, it passed. There were no required check-ins, no home visits. No one ever verified that real education was happening. As for medical care, not a single child had seen a doctor or dentist in over a decade. The parents knew that the fewer outsiders in their world, the fewer cracks in the wall. Some neighbors admitted later that they noticed something. The kids looked thin. They always walked late at night. They never made eye contact. We never saw them in daylight. One neighbor said she once saw 4 kids digging in the trash at 2 a.m. But no one called the police. No one knocked. Because it didn't feel like emergency behavior. It felt like weird parenting. Strict rules, maybe religious extremism. Uncomfortable, but not illegal. The Turpins occasionally attended church. They sat in the back. The kids barely moved. They seemed obedient, quiet, reserved. Louise sometimes brought them in with matching Bibles. No one ever heard them speak, not even Amen. One churchgoer later said, "They looked like a postcard family, but when you looked closer, there was nothing in their eyes." For years, the children didn't try to escape, because they didn't even know they could. They had been taught from birth that the outside world was dangerous, that if they spoke up, they'd be arrested, that the police would hurt them, that strangers would kill them. They believed school was evil, that social workers were child traffickers, that people like you and me were monsters. And when you believe monsters are outside, you stay in your cage. It would take 17 years for one child to find the truth. And that truth, once exposed, would finally bring the house of lies crumbling down. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, family members, and a nation hungry for answers gathered under the heavy chandeliers of the Riverside County Courthouse. For the first time, the world was about to hear the voices of those who had been silent for years. David and Louise Turpin sat in the defendant's box. 2 faces, almost calm, but behind those cold eyes hid decades of secrets. Louise, once the gentle mother who smiled for pictures, now wore a hardened mask. David, the quiet father, kept his gaze low, hands clenched tight. The judge's gavel struck the bench. This court will now hear the testimony of the victims. One by one, the children took the stand. Some could barely speak. Others, like Jordan, found strength they never knew they had. Jordan's voice cracked, but carried a fierce determination. "I never thought I could be free. Every day was fear. I thought I was bad. I thought we deserved it." She recounted the chains, the beatings, the hunger. The nights when her parents would shout curses and slam doors. The crushing weight of silence. Then came the testimony of a brother. His voice low, haunted. "I don't remember what normal feels like. I only know what it was like to be locked in a room. to be ignored. When the police came, it was like waking from a nightmare. But the scars stayed. The courtroom listened, breathless. The prosecution laid out a detailed timeline of abuse, backed by photos, videos, and medical reports. They revealed how the children were kept in cages, how they were starved, chained, and deprived of sunlight and education, how the parents controlled every aspect of their lives, including their thoughts. But then the defense spoke. They painted a picture of a strict but loving family, a household trying to protect the children from a dangerous world. They argued that homeschooling was a right, and that the parents didn't mean harm. The tension in the room was palpable. Would the court accept this twisted version? Could love justify the horror? One prosecutor's voice rang clear. This is not love. This is imprisonment. This is torture, and it will not be tolerated. After weeks of testimony, the verdict was unanimous. David and Louise Turpin were found guilty on multiple counts, including child abuse and torture. They were sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Outside the courthouse, the children began their slow journey toward healing. Counselors, doctors, and social workers worked tirelessly to help them understand a world they never knew. But scars don't heal overnight, and the questions lingered. How do you rebuild a life stolen for decades? How do you forgive the ones who hurt you most?
Kev?
Help. I just ran away.